Welcome back to the Halls of the Dead, Exile. You have successfully completed a tournament. Claim your prize and listen to the words of our Mother of Death, if you can understand them. This video will focus on theories about Hinekora's visions and what they foreshadow for our future, in both PoE 1 and 2. I do recommend watching my previous video about Trial of the Ancestors to get more factual information that covers all NPCs for this league, and once you are ready, we will dive into the well of theories and prophecies within these halls. Because of the convoluted nature of Hinekora's dialogue, this video will be structured differently than my usual videos. We are going to need to establish a dictionary or glossary to decode the language used here. I'll establish the basics about Hinekora, provide a list of terms and what their translation is, then we will walk through what Hinekora's visions are actually saying. Before we've even started a tournament, we get a lot of information about Hinekora from the chieftains, particularly Navali. Navali tells us our coming to the halls was foretold by Hinekora, demonstrating her abilities of prophecy. Hinekora's champion, Tawhanuku, has the same powers of prophecy. She already knows when you will challenge her, and what the outcome will be. It sounds like Hinekora can predict the future, but that's not quite accurate. One of the first things Navali tells us about Hinekora is that she doesn't actually see the future, but she can see into the past, deep in the murk, to see not what you will do, only what you did, and what you shall do again, probably. This dialogue option is called the Future Past, and Navali points out that seeing the future is the domain of chaos, not Hinekora's domain. This one dialogue option is already a dense brick of concepts that we will need as key terms. Navali piles on by saying, "The Mother of Death has pledged herself to a higher impulse. She perpetuates order by ensuring prophecies come to pass." Even before we've gotten to any riddles from the mouth of Death herself, we're already into the deep end of necessary lore knowledge. Before I begin the segment explaining terms, let's go over some of the fun little Easter eggs Navali and others in the halls have for us, before we have to use all of our brain power to untangle Hinekora's riddles. In that same dialogue option about order, Navali says there are only 12 futures in which Rayclass survives the coming darkness. All 12 involve the arrival of someone like yourself to this place. The 12 futures are referring to the 12 playable classes in Path of Exile 2, which is reinforced by Navali saying we, the character, are decades early to these halls. We, the player, are here now and will be returning to the halls in PoE 2 as one of 12 characters, so one of 12 futures. Tawhanuku's dialogue about the chieftains reveals some interesting stuff. Rakiata in the halls appears to be a woman or feminine presenting. Rakiata is referred to by Ikiaho as they, and Utula is surprised Rakiata is not a man, although he doesn't know much about Karui history. It's not said on Tesalio's ring or any other source if Rakiata was a man in life. Tawhanuku's stories have characters that are not necessarily literally the chieftain they're about, but the genders usually match. But Rakiata's story is about a he. After getting separated from their tribe, drifting alone on the ocean, they are washed ashore, and he saw he had a new face, but those on the shore recognize him. The story is about knowing your true self. Keeping in mind Kilauawa's saying, people look like their true selves in the halls, it's implied Rakiata woke in the halls as their true self, a woman or non-binary, which is a subtle but wholesome transition story. Tawhanuku's Kilauawa dialogue is from the perspective of the bird who got cooked for Tukohama's feast in the Kitava's hunger story. Kahuturoa's story is about the existential horror of eternity, especially when you are forced into eternity by another entity, and you can't stop the journey. Akoya's story might be about the Clay Shaper, a woman who lived during the time of the Lightless, a proto-Vol, who went on to help Ameriketh Akara, or tribe, found the Order of the Jinn. And the Clay Shaper has apparently met Kalandra, who Ikiaho has also met, and Tafa's story about Ikiaho just says, there exists a vast mirror in the ground. To gaze into those waters is to see a mortal soul. There is wisdom and counsel to be had, but some do not survive the truth. Is the underground mirror associated with Uhtred of the Kalgur, the portal to Kalandra's lake? That's what it sounds like, but maybe not, because according to Medved, another Kalgur leader, they built a mirror under the earth to hide from the night sky, they being some group that existed before the Kalgur were on Rayclast. We don't know any association with Kalandra hiding from the night sky. But the mirror Tawhanuku is talking about has got to be this mirror, and the soul who doles out wisdom and counsel has to be Kalandra, right? So I am saying that this mirror is that mirror. Anyway, Hinekora apparently built her domain, these halls, to function while she lay dreaming, as she had foreseen the creation of the beast and that it would put her to sleep. She created some form of soul-picking automation where all Karui souls could be saved from oblivion, even if Hinekora was not active. If the halls themselves can save Karui souls, is Hinekora really all that stands between us and oblivion? If those that die cease to be unless Hinekora intervenes, was there ever a time when Karui souls went to oblivion? Or could Hinekora be gone forever with no impact to the hall's functionality? And are other areas of the halls just crowded with every single Karui soul that has ever been, good or bad? Or is there some amount of discretion with who gets taken to the underworld? Now that we've had an appetizer, let's start unpacking some terms. Our first term is future past. This is how Hinekora's power of prophecy is described. It's not seeing the future, but it's actually seeing into the past to understand what will likely occur in the future. The concept of future past was discussed in Expedition League. The Druids of the Circle, led by Medved, used the future past as well. Medved and his mystics would look into scrying pools to see the past to predict the future of the Kalgur. They saw time as a circle, a cycle that repeats, which is very reminiscent of how Hinekora and Tapwa see time. If time is a circle with all steps in order, I can look back from my current step 3 all the way back to another step 3 to see steps 4, 5, 6, etc. When Medved and his mystics started using virtue gems, they could no longer scry into the past, and thus the future was unknown, and they called themselves druids of the Broken Circle. I suspected that corruption was the cause of this breaking, because the Kalgur had never experienced virtue gems or corruption before coming to Rayclast. Partaking in virtue gems severed them from whatever mystical, but presumably godless, powers they had to see the past. Knowing that Hinekora utilizes the future past, perhaps the ancient Kalgur, consciously or not, were using Hinekora's divine power to scry, and their immersion into corruption severed them from that divinity. Either way, the mechanism and concept of the future past is consistent between both camps. Time is a circle, and by looking into the past, specifically looking at events in the past and what outcomes came from what actions, you can mostly predict the future. Chaos and order are two cosmic entities or forces that have become more and more prominent as leagues progress. We'll start with chaos because we know more about chaos, even if Hinekora follows order. Chaos was formally introduced in Ultimatum by his servant, the sassy Trial Master. The Trial Master tells us that chaos is a force who sees all outcomes of every decision. He is every coin flip, he is every dice roll, but he is most fascinated by those beings powerful enough to influence their own odds in the face of many outcomes. That's why Chaos has tasked his servant, the Trial Master, to test us in particular. We are powerful enough to have piqued Chaos's interest. While the Trial Master and Ultimatum League have Vol origins, Chaos is not a Vol god. In fact, he's not a god at all. Navali confirms Chaos is not a god when she warns us to fear that which remains awake when even the gods slumber, in her dialogue called Chaos. I also believe the entities Chaos and Order are discussed by the Envoy as the Progenitor, being Chaos, and the Lightkeeper, being Order. The Progenitor is the entity that created the Maven, an entity the Envoy fears we will enrage if we hurt the Maven too badly. The Progenitor is described in contrast to the Lightkeeper, two opposing factions inextricably entwined, like yin and yang. These are not confirmed to be the same pair of entities, but let's explore some of their similarities. Chaos and Order are described by Navali as two impulses as unlike each other as any twins could ever be, locked in eternal conflict by their very nature. Entity and impulse are terms we will see for Chaos and Order. Impulse is also used by the Envoy in relation to the Progenitor and Lightkeeper, albeit in a slightly different way. The Envoy calls the Progenitor and the Lightkeeper the Weavers of Destiny. This particular Envoy dialogue, titled Order, is the most illuminating, pun intended, to this parallel. The Weavers of Destiny do not share knowledge of the path, meaning the future. The Lightkeeper illuminates the way forward, which sounds to me like using the future past to predict outcomes, but only the Progenitor may cast its gaze forward, birthing new ambitions, which sounds like Chaos, being able to see every possible outcome and choosing which one to participate in. It is the difference between knowing what path you're on, Order, and choosing which path to take, Chaos. The future past and Order can predict steps on the current path, whereas Chaos can see every possible deviation from the path and possibly influence which deviation occurs. So the Lightkeeper illuminating and the Progenitor birthing new ambitions sounds a lot like Chaos and Order. The Progenitor and Lightkeeper are also at odds. The Envoy says, in this cold conflict, an impulse emerges. We are going to put a pin in that for now. Consider Chaos and Order as higher impulses, but this new impulse being born out of the conflict between the Progenitor and the Lightkeeper, Chaos and Order, is important. Now, about Order specifically. Unlike Chaos, who takes amusement in unlikelihoods and surprising events, Hinekora serves Order, ensuring that what must happen, happens. Chaos sees what Hinekora cannot, the myriad span of all that has yet to happen. Order is embodied by the concept of future past, the idea that time is cyclical and will continue in the same steps as it has before. So if you look back to an equivalent step to your current situation, you can see the order of events that took place in the past to predict the future. The Envoy often talks about the path that everyone walks, that the Lightkeeper illuminates the path, but we do not see it and do not need to see it. To look ahead is to fall to dust in the light. This phrase, dust in the light, is a threat against those who veer off Order's path. The dialogue, Lightkeeper's Wrath, is about the Maven's escape from her prison, and how no one could follow the Maven's path past the barrier or they fell to dust in the light. Following the Maven was the duty, or path, of one alone. The Lightkeeper, Order, not only sees the path, but ensures each step of the path is taken. Order turns the wheel, you might say, keeping time circling upon itself neatly. This league is the first time we get more info about Order specifically, rather than just as a juxtaposition to Chaos. But some of the past discussions of Order expose a consequence of the battle between Chaos and Order. A consequence we as players are all too familiar with, but may not have known its origin. The Trial Master says there is a sinister force in the mists of raw creation that seeks to oppose him. It is a cowardly impulse, one that tangles fate to bring together mortals for the purpose of order. And this is the same impulse that the envoy said emerged from the conflict between the Progenitor and Lightkeeper. This cowardly impulse is the Scourge. A few things confirm this. The Trial Master's dialogue is called the Anathema, meaning something that is hated or denounced. And the Anathema ring has flavor text about Scourge, Bedat in particular, saying, "The Demon Lord opens a gateway, unleashing a litany of pain upon the world." This ring was introduced in Sanctum, where we learned that a woman named Lycia has made a deal with the Scourge demon Bedat, and has lured people into the Sanctum for centuries to take their energy, giving it to Bedat, to eventually allow the Scourge to enter our world unimpeded. You might say Bedat is tangling fate to bring together mortals for its purpose. The Trial Master and by proxy Chaos seem to think the Scourge are serving order. It's not an unreasonable thought. A world in which no life exists besides the Scourge, who all want the same thing, to consume, would certainly be more orderly in some ways. Less variety, more camaraderie, what have you. Now, seeing that Hinekora, and by proxy all those who tap into the future past, follow order, is Hinekora, obeying order, trying to bring about the Scourge? I don't think so, and we'll look over why when we go through Hinekora's dialogue. I suspect that Chaos was simply biased against its eternal enemy, and the birth of the Scourge was an unintended consequence on both Chaos and Order's behalf, with no loyalty or affiliation towards the other. If you want to know more about the Scourge, I have a few videos on them, although I think the Sanctum video would be most relevant. Future past, chaos, order, impulse, Scourge. You might be thinking, okay, we've got our terms, let's talk about what Hinekora says. No, my sweet summer child, we have only laid out the terms that you should have already known before we started our journey. We are only now diving into our new glossary. This will at least be quicker, but it may make less sense until we put the terms in context. First, characters. The thief is Sin, the god known as the Thief of Virtue. The Archon is Valdo Caesarius, Xana's father and also the Shaper. Both Xana and Valdo himself confirm he was Archon during his life, and he is the only person to have that title. The King of Dreams is the Elder. The Elder called the Nexus of the Atlas, where he originally resided, the Dreamlands. When Valdo finds him in the Dreamlands, the Elder portrayed himself as the King of the Dreamlands, who had been trapped by the hateful Watchers of Decay by the Starforged Blade. The Elder also feeds on memories and dreams. The Messenger from the Stars is the Envoy. Some people might think it's Shaper, you'll see why later, but the Archon is the Shaper. Envoy means messenger, quite literally, and the Envoy comes to us from the cosmos alongside the Maven. His second sentence to us is, "I am a simple messenger from a place of great darkness." The Awakener is Cirrus. His in-game boss title is Cirrus, Awakener of Worlds. He drops Awakener's orbs. The Pale One is Bedat. His in-game name is Bedat, Archangel of Death, but he is the leader of the Scourge faction called the Pale Demons. She with 3 faces is more ambiguous, but I am 90% sure this is Xana. This one is more difficult to explain out of context, so I won't. I have seen arguments though that it is Alva, which is possible, so I'll use this time to say why I do not think it is Alva. We do see Alva by at least 2 faces in current PoE. We see her as Alva, and as Matt helpfully confirmed in our interview, as the last to die. We also see in demos of PoE 2 that Alva will be reappearing, rather prominently in fact. So for sure, she shows up as 3 different faces. But the important part this misses is that she with 3 faces will also know us by 3 different faces. Between PoE 1 and 2, sure, we are different people. But presumably in PoE 1, between Alva and Last to Die, we are the same character. For Xana, we see her as 1 face. Or at least we had before she left us alone, heartbroken, with nothing but cosmic entities for friends. This definition presumes that we will see Xana again in the future, likely in PoE 2, if we also require a different face. That only covers 2, right? Well, PoE Mobile takes place back in the time of High Templar Venarius, 20 years before PoE 1 takes place. We work alongside Dominus and Valdo, and meet a child version of Xana. This most certainly qualifies as a 3rd face for both ourselves and Xana. So a future meeting between us and Xana in PoE 2 would best fit the character she with 3 faces. King of the Godless is the Kalgur King. The Kalgur we meet in Expedition proudly proclaim they do not believe in gods, they believe in knowledge. They have a king, but they are extremely dodgy about their feelings on him, or if the king is who sent them to Rayclast, and if he did what his intentions are. In demos of PoE 2, we see that our Kalgur friends are trying to colonize Rayclast just like their ancestors. So we may learn more about the king then. The masked one is Riker Maloney. He wears a mask. Done. Okay, more than that, Riker is involved actively or behind the scenes in multiple leagues. He is currently part of the Immortal Syndicate and contracts out heist items for us to retrieve. Before that, he was part of the Replica researchers and he was looking into resurrection. When the researchers could not provide a way to resurrect, he left. Seeking resurrection explains Riker's motives for joining the Immortal Syndicate. A recent div card, Endless Night, leads me to believe Riker was seeking resurrection for his family in particular. While div cards are not a canon source, I'm sticking to Riker being the masked one. The Forger is Administrator Kotra, who leads the charge of Replica researchers. She is literally forging unique items in both senses of the word. She is creating them and copying them. Her goal is to harness the ability to mirror items, to perfectly recreate them and their abilities, although currently all of her attempted forgeries have different powers than their original. There are other characters in Hinekora's dialogue, but they are either referred to by their proper name and thus don't need to be clarified here, or they are simply one-off descriptors rather than titles, making them less pivotal, if still interesting, to our discussion. One final piece of preparation before we dive into Hinekora's trippy tirade is pointing out the 2 concepts given titles that still need to be defined. These 2 concepts are absolutely pivotal to understanding Hinekora's visions, but do not yet have clear answers. These concepts are the imbalance and the fulcrum of destiny. Once we understand the pieces Hinekora has set up, we can decipher the meaning of these 2 concepts. Ready or not, here we go. The first 14 dialogues go in order for every player. After that, it's a luck of the draw after finishing a tournament. Let's go through the 14 set in order. Our first tournament win pulls Hinekora out of a vision, back to our time and our Rayclast. She has difficulty discerning which life she is experiencing is real, and which was the true illusion. In her other life, she had a family, whereas in this life she was unable to. She says she has much to tell them being the lost souls of her people, but the dreams call her back even if she doesn't want to go. Since Hinekora serves order, I don't think Hinekora is experiencing an alternate reality, but a past life, as her gift of vision is of the future past. An alternate or parallel reality and existence would be the realm of chaos. Think the Last to Die, for example, and Alva from an alternate Rayclast. The last Jedi's power literally comes from chaos, passed down through her bloodline. So in some past life, Hinekora is experiencing being a mother to her own family, rather than being the mother of death. We can also establish that she is, as Kalm suspected, somewhat stuck in her visions. She seems to want to pull out, but can't stay in the current time and place. Like the visions are an ocean whose current Hinekora keeps getting pulled back into. The second piece even starts by Hinekora saying, "Reality and dream mix together like waves in a tide pool." Here, she mentions the imbalance. Hinekora foresaw all of this, and the plan is still in motion. Something that Hinekora has planned, or that Order has planned, is in motion to deal with this imbalance. We teeter on the edge of oblivion, flailing, waiting to be saved or doomed by the slightest push. The imbalance is related to the Fulcrum of Destiny, which is discussed in a bit, but the idea of teetering before oblivion is important. Presumably, if all was balanced, we would not be teetering and on the brink of doom. This imbalance is threatening the Fulcrum of Destiny to topple. The next piece shows more of Hinekora's confusion regarding her current or real reality. She can't remember when we are, but she does recognize that we are not us yet. We are early, wearing a different face. That means that Hinekora expected us in the future during PoE 2 most likely, as that takes place 20 years in the future with different characters. She sees us both here now and here in the future, which means that Hinekora is seeing us, the player, human being not on Rayclast, rather than us as the character. We are like a soul for the character that persists across time and bodies. The fourth piece is where characters and time start getting named. Hinekora drops that he knew the truth, possibly in relation to Dominus, as she said right before, "Would it matter if your world was an illusion?" referencing Dominus's famous quote. Dominus must catch you is present tense. We have fought and killed Dominus as this current character after he caught us and exiled us. The Archon's plan to rescue his daughter will fail refers to Voldo and events that happened 20 years in the past. When High Templar Venarius discovered that Voldo had gotten the ancient map device working, but wouldn't let Venarius use it, Venarius threatened Voldo's daughter, Xana, at knife point until Voldo conceded and they all entered the Atlas. Venarius released the Elder, Voldo and Xana escaped, and Voldo bid Xana to hide in a closet while he returned to the Dreamlands in the Atlas with the intent to stop the Elder and save everyone, including his daughter. We know that while Xana survived, Voldo did not defeat the Elder, and was turned into the Shaper through his complete immersion into the Atlas. Then Hinekora says, they must all be present at the Fulcrum of Destiny if Rayclast is to, presumably, survive. A fulcrum is the point upon which a lever or beam balances. So the Fulcrum of Destiny is the point, the time, place, and event on which destiny is balanced. And thus the imbalance threatens the fulcrum. But who are they all that must be present at the fulcrum? Does that include Dominus and the Shaper? Ideally not, considering we have killed Dominus and the Shaper is dead. So let's continue. Fifth tournament, Hinekora says cataclysms await down most paths, and those paths then turn on and eat each other. These things must happen. You must make them happen. We know of at least 2 cataclysms of the past, and the events that led up to each cataclysm definitely have parallels. But does Hinekora mean that we are going to cause a cataclysm? I don't know, but I lean more towards her saying that these things, meaning all of the incidents and moments she is listing, must happen, and that we play a role in making sure they all happen. Cataclysms that have happened are meant to happen. We must stay on the right path, possibly to avoid a cataclysm, or possibly in the face of a cataclysm's inevitability. She more succinctly describes the Fulcrum of Destiny as the moment on which all existence is balanced, and tells us that it begins with the Fulcrum, meaning either the things we must make happen or everything ever was started by this moment or hinges on this moment. At this point, my understanding of Fulcrum of Destiny is messier than when I just had the definition of its terms. Hinekora adds that the King of Dreams must be allowed to escape, and 2 High Templars must witness this. The King of Dreams is the Elder, and his escape from Starforge in the Dreamlands was witnessed by High Templar Venarius. So, 1 instance is checked. As for the second instance, I'm not positive, but this could refer to PoE Mobile. I didn't get a chance to try it myself, but we interact with Dominus, who at the time is an Inquisitor for the Templars under High Templar Venarius. I believe that PoE Mobile's story centers around us helping Dominus serve Venarius. Right at the time, Venarius had contracted Voldo to study the ancient map device which led to the Elder encounter. If Dominus went to the Dreamlands with Venarius, escaped, and became High Templar later, that could account for Hinekora's vision here. Dialogue 6 picks up the spice level right off the bat, with Hinekora saying, "For once, chaos is not the enemy." Order and chaos have been at odds since time before time existed. So order not seeing chaos as the enemy means this imbalance is a bigger cosmic threat than ever. It is something so monumental, 2 elemental entities need to cease fire to surmount it. We must seek Chaos's servant, the Trial Master, which is something we have already done in Ultimatum. And before or after that, we will be tested by the Mariketh. We will have 3 challenges, and the third is most important to prove ourselves. I'm going to say this is a future event as I don't know what it can refer to, but we do meet up with Mariketh in PoE 2. Note that Hinekora says Chaos sees us for what we truly are, like Hinekora sees us. She either means that Chaos and Order see us as an important piece in the moment at the Fulcrum of Destiny, or as the real player, the soul of each character. Actually, probably both. The 7th piece brings up sour memories for me. I've been burned by Doriani bait before, but I'm going to fall for it again. But let's go over the dialogue in order. Hinekora says the messenger from the stars, the envoy, was once a man and a father. This is why some people think the messenger from the stars is the Shaper. The Shaper has a celestial motif and is for sure once a man and a father of Xana, but why call him a messenger, if not to signify him as the envoy? And does the Atlas count as being from the stars? Or does Shaper just have a starry aesthetic? The envoy literally comes from the cosmos, which is inarguably from the stars. The envoy at one point says, "Woven were we," referring to himself as we, to take on the image of those who needed to hear its message. I try to fall into my past and cannot. The envoy looks humanoid to become our messenger, but he doesn't know his own natural form. He can't remember anything from his past. The envoy implies he was taken as prisoner by the Lightkeeper and charged as ward and protector of the Maven. Hinekora also says that this messenger has a sliver of his heart that remains. This also sounds like Shaper, because Voldo seems to have moments of awareness with Xana before being lost to his madness. But canonically, Shaper is dead, and the envoy also has moments that imply he has some humanity. He admires us for a moment, feeling the sadness he sought in his youth and the relief he sought it no longer. He still has some feelings, including resentment at his imprisonment by higher impulses, even if he's serving them. He can't remember his past, which could explain how he knows something vital, but doesn't know that he knows. He could have been a man and a father for all he knows. And then the bomb. Doryani is missing. When I first saw this dialogue, I was stunned. I didn't explain Doryani in the characters because if you don't know who Doryani is, you have to go back and watch some past videos. But in the most brief recap I can muster, Doryani was Queen Atziri's thaumaturgist and the instigator of the fall of the Vol, the first cataclysm that we know of. We know Doryani went into the beast, like Malachi, but we have never known what actually caused the fall of the Vol. Malachi quote-unquote lived inside the beast, producing corruption to create his nightmare for hundreds of years after he initially entered the beast, and caused the recent cataclysm. So what does Hinekora mean that Doryani is missing? Well, it could be a perspective from the past, like a Vol person noticing, "Hey guys, has anyone seen Doryani?" and cue cataclysm. It could just be poking fun at all of the times lore enthusiasts like myself have seen any Vol-themed content and immediately screamed, "Doryani!" Or maybe Doryani is supposed to have a part to play in this moment, this fulcrum of destiny, but he is missing from the path of the future past. Maybe we have to find Doryani. Maybe Doryani is in an unreachable domain, like the domain of timeless conflict which Hinekora cannot see into. Maybe Doryani's right behind you! No, he's not. It's just dialogue option 8. And here we see Hinekora confirming that Sin got the idea and the means to create the beast from his visit to the Lake of Kalandra. In my Kalandra video, I go into depth about this, but it seemed pretty certain that Sin, the thief of virtue, came to visit Kalandra, and she gave Sin a shattered mirror to disrupt divinity, a problem she saw as a reflection drawn by belief. Kalandra was not a fan of gods, and now that we know Sin was non-consensually ascended to godhood by his brother, Maxarius/Innocence, Kalandra giving Sin the seed of the beast to neutralize divinity makes even more sense for both Sin and Kalandra. We now know that Hinekora suggested Sin visit the lake, knowing that Sin creating the beast was part of the path, the plan that is set in place to deal with this imbalance. Hinekora knew the beast would put her to sleep before the fall of the Vol, so she tries to warn her people to not try to stop Queen Atziri and the fall of the Vol, an event both chaos and order view as inevitable. In fact, chaos sees Atziri's reign and fall as so inevitable, it calls Atziri's reign an island of stability, where the history of her existence is a single unbroken course. There is no world, real or imagined, where Atziri did not lead the Vol to ruin. Dialogue 9 is pretty easy, thankfully. Hinekora lays out facts. The fall of the Vol happens, Doryani is missing, still don't know what that's about, sorry y'all. Malachi will construct his design to enter the beast, we will enter the beast, and Malachi's desire to have ties to his mortality, the 3 organs we retrieve, will be our key to destroying him. Unlike Dialogue 9, which is all things that have already happened, Dialogue 10 is all possible future events that must be prevented. Or at least 2 of 3 can't happen. The king of the godless, the Kalgur king, can't find what he seeks. We don't currently know what he's looking for, although none of the expedition crew seem to like their king. He must be pretty powerful though, because Rog is afraid that if they disrespect the king on Rayclast, he will know back in Kalgur. The expedition crew is searching for the Triskelion flame, but we don't know if they're searching for it on behalf of the king. Second thing, the Masked One must save his family before Crimson touches the mountain peak. This one is tricky. If the Masked One is Riker, isn't his family's death the reason he seeks resurrection? It's possible I've misinterpreted who the Masked One is, but Jun specifically refers to Riker's mask when discussing him. I also don't know what Crimson touching the mountain peak could be. There are multiple mountains, and Crimson could be many things. Blood, most likely, but there are other things. A random Hinekora dialogue says, "A mask hides grief beyond measure. A man carrying a mountain threatens to rupture the sky." Seems like it's about the same masked one. This one says he is carrying a mountain. So the mountain peak that Crimson cannot touch might not be a literal mountain. What mountain could a man carry? If he's carrying the mountain could be his family, and Crimson is their death? I'm not sure if his family and this mountain analogy are related. Maybe his family is in peril, maybe this has already come to pass, maybe I just don't know everything. The third thing, the Forger must fail in her reckless mission, is pretty clear. The Forger, Administrator ToTA, has been trying to recreate or forge unique items to reproduce the power of a Mirror of Kalandra, but on unique armors and weapons that even a mirror can't replicate. This league even introduces a new item, Replica Dragonfang's Flight, which ToTA doesn't remember making. This replica does not have an original in-game. It is a replica of nothing we or ToTA have seen. I discussed this in my video about replica research, but I think ToTA wants to use this power of replica to mirror extremely powerful and dangerous items. Things like living ice, things that could threaten all of humanity. So, 2 of these events have not come to pass for certain. The other is up in the air. It might or might not have already happened. ToTA seems to be inching closer to completing her reckless mission, and the expedition crew reappears in PoE 2 with new goals. Dialogue 11, Hinekora says, "Corruption clouds my sight once more," confirming that corruption can disrupt the visions of future past. As for what moment this dialogue is talking about, I think it's talking about High Templar Vol and the Purity Rebellion. Faithful heroes united together, meaning people like Kaum, Victario, Rigwald, etc., under the High Templar Vol to take on the Gemling Legion and Emperor Chittis. By gathering the peoples of Rayclast, the Purity Rebellion succeeded. They stood united, but then Vol was tricked by Malachi and boom, Cataclysm. That's my best guess on this one. Finally, we get the infamous quote about She with 3 faces. She will know you by 3 different faces, as will you her. I've already argued why I think this is not Alva, but Xana. Alva may have 3 faces, but we would only have 2 with her. Hinekora also says you must find her, meaning she's not someone we are currently talking to. Alva is happy enough to pop up into our maps with us. We don't really need to find her. This last bit is actually most important to why I think it's Xana. In her mind lies the key. Now, we haven't yet established what this key is. I don't know if the key is related to the Fulcrum of Destiny, but it is for sure related to a dialogue that isn't in order. The next 2 in-order dialogues are just flavor about Hinekora being in different times and visions, so we're skipping these ones and going straight to the key. The random Hinekora dialogue that explains this key says, "A key passes between hands many times, but must be recovered before the Awakener can imprison the King of Dreams. The King of Dreams will be released by the removal of a key from a lock." Now hear me out. I understand that a key in someone's mind doesn't quite line up with a key that can pass hands many times. Let me lay out what this piece says and then I'll walk through what I'm thinking. A key must be found before the Awakener, Cirrus, can imprison the Elder. This does come to pass, meaning the key has been found. But the key has to be removed from a lock for the King of Dreams to escape. An initial reading might say the key is the cosmic arcana, which is used to trap the Elder. But I think the lock is the cosmic arcana, and the key is something related to Xana. Xana tells us after her father disappeared into the Atlas to fight the Elder, she was handed off to a series of well-off foster homes. If Xana is the key, this could explain being passed to many hands. But what in Xana's mind is key? When Xana tolerated us, she would warn of overuse of the Atlas, of how it drives people mad. But she willingly locked herself and all the Conquerors in the Atlas to prevent them from escaping it. Xana has a unique ability to withstand the negative influence of the Atlas, even over long exposure. And all the Conquerors went mad, except Xana. Cirrus does reappear in the Atlas after getting trapped with the Elder in the Cosmic Arcana. And he is able to escape the Atlas because we enter it and remove Xana and her key from the Atlas prison as well. The Elder and Cirrus were locked by the Cosmic Arcana, which is presumably still in the Atlas. But now the question is Cirrus the Awakener now King of Dreams the Elder? I am 50-50 on whether I think Cirrus and the Elder became one entity combined in the Cosmic Arcana. On one hand, this trapping of the Elder causes the silence, meaning the Elder as it was once understood is gone. The silence is the absence of the Elder that cosmic beings could sense. However, would cosmic forces really see a fusion Awakener Elder and think, "No Elder here! It's the silence, time to visit the Atlas"? Perhaps the combination removed the Elder's cosmic status from him. He is, after all, a servant of the decay. The decay is a higher impulse, while the Elder is not. But why would this prophecy be framed as the King of Dreams rather than the Awakener in that case? It's entirely possible this refers to a future event, one that happens once we find Xana. We have a lot of puzzle pieces, but not quite enough to define the imbalance or the fulcrum of destiny. There are a few things that cannot happen, like the Kalgur King and Administrator Kotra being successful, or us failing the Maraketh's 3 challenges. Some things have to happen, like all of the endgame events so far, but also finding She with 3 faces, maybe even Doriani. And they all must be present at the fulcrum of destiny. I would say all of these events that must happen or must not happen contribute to the imbalance. Basically, we are walking a tightrope of a path. If every checkpoint and event is not met, we will veer off the path into one of the many paths that lead to oblivion. If all of our cards are played right, all of our ducks in a row, they all will be present at the fulcrum of destiny, the deciding moment that can save Rayclast. But the imbalance is more than just the need to take every correct step. It is a force that tips the difficulty against us. Rather than having multiple paths where the entire world doesn't explode or existence doesn't end as we know it, we only have a very specific, very difficult path that we must stick to stave off this imbalance and not all die. And what is this force, this imbalance? I think many people have already suspected, but this force is almost certainly the Scourge. The threat of the Scourge coming to Rayclast has been brought up over and over again, becoming more and more dire, more and more real over the leagues. The first whispers were Venarius 20 years in the past, taking seemingly absurd measures to prevent the Scourge from entering Rayclast after learning of their existence. Knowledge only elite Templars are privy to. Even though Venarius was the first character we saw take action against the Scourge threat, their existence and intent is knowledge passed down by the Templars going back at least hundreds of years. We had seen the Scourge, at that point beyond, but we get into crazy stuff all the time. We weren't preparing Rayclast to survive their invasion. If anything, we were taking the fight to the Scourge. Trial Master in Ultimatum brings up this cowardly impulse, which we've determined is the Scourge, and this impulse brings together mortals for its own sinister cause. Then Last to Die shows up and says everyone on her Rayclast is dead, except her, and it will happen to our Rayclast unless we start fighting them. Now the threat is a bit more credible. In Sanctum we find Lycia, a Templar from before the recent Cataclysm who has made a pact with Baydat, one of the Scourge demons, to give him enough power to freely enter Rayclast, and the threat seems imminent. Hinekora has a couple lines about the Scourge, one more blatant, the other more interpretive. The first one, more blatant, is "Beware the gaze of the Pale One." Baydat is the leader of the Pale Order of Scourge Demons, and Lycia cries, "Baydat's gaze," whenever she gets the chance, so that's cut and dry. A colony of ants burrows through a wall is pretty clear as well. A large group or swarm of Scourge are trying to break into Rayclast, prevented by the barrier between dimensions which grows ever thinner. Truth and Hope are enemies? Not sure what this means or if it's just ominous. Hinekora's other dialogue about Scourge says, "Two enemies, born opposed, clasped hands only once. The silent wall and the raging storm oppose the endless swarm." I interpret this as order and chaos ceasing fire against each other for only one moment to fight the Scourge, this endless swarm. The description of the silent wall and the raging storm are more akin to the Lightkeeper and the Progenitor, which support my idea that the Lightkeeper equals order and the Progenitor equals chaos. We know both chaos and order agree that the Scourge must be stopped. The only thing they have ever agreed upon, the one exception that stops their cold conflict, as the Trial Master puts it. So then, the fulcrum of destiny is the moment at which chaos, order, and all the pieces of the puzzle come together to defeat the Scourge. This moment, this one exception, where everything comes together, must be perfectly set up so that humanity and existence can survive. Otherwise, it's Scourge time, baby. We did it! We solved the riddles! Only, is the Scourge the only thing Hinekora is talking about? I don't think so. There's so many seemingly random pieces left, and so many bits that take place in the future in PoE 2, and I don't think the threat of the Scourge and the Fulcrum of Destiny will continue all the way 20 years into the future. I believe this is something that will happen here in PoE 1, and will likely conclude the Maven storyline, because if Chaos and Order are the Progenitor and Lightkeeper, that would tie all of the cosmic storylines together nicely. That's not to say once the Scourge are defeated, these cosmic entities will just up and vanish and never be important again. Of course not, especially for entities like Chaos and Order, who seem to be much more active on Rayclast themselves, at least by proxy of the beings who serve them. But would the prophecies of Hinekora in Trial of the Ancestors spell out the pinnacle of PoE 2? I don't think so. We know all the past events have happened, things like us killing the beast, Dominus finding us, etc. Some of the future events might even happen or be threats for PoE 1, rather than the future in PoE 2. But I don't think all of them are pieces relating to this Fulcrum of Destiny. I think Hinekora is shotgun blasting us with all the information she knows that is relevant to us and our path, and that path includes all of our future past. We are part of the Fulcrum of Destiny. We are needed to stop the imbalance of Scourge, but that's not all we do, and that's not all we are here for. So how do we know what is key to stopping the Scourge and what is just prophecy and Easter eggs? Well, until we know when the Fulcrum of Destiny is supposed to happen, we won't know. I wish I had a better answer than that, but I don't. But fret not, my little lore lover. We can still amuse ourselves with some more of Hinekora's possibly unrelated prophecies. Or we could get into the implications of the Maven being a creation of the Progenitor, watched by the Lightkeeper, and if that means she's also an impulse born of the cold conflict between them, like the Scourge. Or how could the Progenitor and Lightkeeper be chaos and order if the former were only just drawn to the Atlas, and thus rayclassed, by the silence of the Elder's absence? Or whether or not serving a higher impulse means you have any contact or direct instructions from them, or if they're just a power source you tap into, or a philosophy. And if the Progenitor is chaos, does that mean Kadiro talked to Maven's mommy? And where physically would an interaction like that take place? I think I've loaded you all with as much information as any one person could reasonably consume, but oh well, here's your unnecessary dessert. This dialogue about a warrior wanting to be a goddess where the rivers flow with sand, it's some Mariketh thing, probably relating to a Mariketh person of the past, who lived when the Vastiri plains were lush, which are now a desert. Sins of the parents return in search of blood? No idea. Next. Great leaders sink into quicksand of the mind. Only a shadow can save the blind. That rhymes. No idea. Next. Spider on a throne of artifice spinning a web across the world. Sounds like Arakali, a goddess worshipped by both the Asmiri and Vol, who created temples to her. She created potions to heal her followers, and made them by killing and eating others. But it's probably more metaphorical than that. Any shadowy person who controls others or weaves webs could be considered a spider. And it sounds like this person had worldly influence, an influence that involved corruption, bringing corruption to places that were previously unspoiled. Maybe still Arakali, could be somebody like Malachi, as he manipulated many people, and the effects of his cataclysm tainted many lands. Next. Fear and faith one and the same. New soul arrives, the hungry child would rather burn it all down. This is about innocence creating the Templars by utilizing the fear of the newcomers, who feared the cleansing fire they had escaped from. Innocence utilized their fear to create faith. Yes, I saw Divinia's new dialogue, and yes, I will make a little video about it. Next. I have no idea what this one means. The sword against the weight of time itself, encircled princes, salvation of humanity. Time is capitalized, meaning it's probably a cosmic entity. It sounds similar to the Elder being trapped by Starforge, but I actually don't think that's what it's talking about. I don't get it, but I want to know more. Next. A bright future lies in a dark past. The erudite thaumaturge is missing. The Grand Palace collapses for want of a single brick. God damn it, this is Doryani. Next. The volcano is towering, but consumes all that live in its shadow. The nightmare ends when the dreamer is awakened. Could be about Kaum, he likes volcanoes. He lived in a lava nightmare and was awakened from his nightmare by us killing him. Next. A liar convinces a good man to flee. A lord ravages his own land in search of legitimacy. A noblewoman from a distant land is not who she claims to be. Not sure who the liar is or who flees, but the lord ravaging his own land for legitimacy is almost certainly Count Gianor in PoE 2. We spend Act 1 in Ezimir, and the Count, known as the Iron Count, is making his people suffer. He's who almost hangs us in the character select screen. In PoE 1, he's trying to contract items from Rogue Harbor that prove his claim to his Ezimite fiefdom. The noblewoman from a distant land is most probably his wife, the Countess, who is the lady seen at the beginning of ExileCon's new PoE 2 trailer. Perhaps she has influenced Gianor to seek out the Seed of Corruption, the chase item for at least Acts 1 and 2 of PoE 2. According to the new trailer, she wants to end all divine influence. She blames the gods, all gods, for the destruction of Oriath and the world. As we know, corruption is the opposite of divinity, so a Seed of Corruption seems like a good weapon in that fight against the gods. Some people think she's Xana, and I'm not sure. The Countess's hair is black, not red, and Xana was never really focused on the gods. Xana has bigger fish to fry in the Atlas. Although the Countess is hiding her identity, so dyeing her red hair black could be a way for Xana to hide. And we do have to find Xana with a new face. So maybe this Countess, this noble woman who is not who she claims to be, is Xana. It could be. I love it. Can't wait. Next. Lumbering stomachs with mouths that consume, ignorance is a weapon that cuts cleanly. It's a reference to the Tangle and the cleansing fire. Next. This one talks about the meddlers and a court jester. Tawhanuku calls us a jester, but we don't really know any nobles, and I don't know who would be considered meddlers, and we haven't fallen off any cliffs yet. So, next. This one is just cute. I don't know what it refers to, besides talking about Queen Atziri's constancy in the future past. And then, bam! Our favorite time-traveling treasure hunter gets called out by name for goofing around too much with time. Feels like teacher Hinekora is dealing with a bad student. Alva Valai, stop mucking about in time! I love it, it's very cute, and also helps reaffirm that Alva isn't she with three faces, as Hinekora knows Alva all too well, by name, as a nuisance. Alright, those are all of the dialogue options I was able to find, or that others helped me find throughout this league by completing tournaments. A serious thanks to everyone who helped me gather this Hinekora intel. While we have a good idea of what prophecies of hers have already happened, it will be interesting to see which ones we haven't seen that will happen and when. To finish this off, I'll theorize which ones I think will happen before PoE 2. I believe the Imbalance and Fulcrum of Destiny will happen before PoE 2, and I think that involves conflict with the Scourge. While I'd love to say Xana's return will happen in our PoE 1 campaign, that can't happen to fulfill the She with Three Faces prophecy. Xana's return will have to happen in PoE 2. I suspect the re-release of the Elder has already happened with Cirrus, so that prophecy might already be fulfilled. I think Administrator Kotra's pursuit of replicas could be a storyline finished in PoE 1, as I don't suspect her research will last for 20 years. However, I do think that the King of Kalgur will not be a threat until PoE 2. I think whatever the envoy or the messenger from the stars knows that is vital that he doesn't remember will play a role in our current story. It will probably have to do with the battle against the Scourge at the Fulcrum of Destiny. Everything else I think has already happened or will happen in our next campaign. There is nothing left but to wait and see what steps await us on our destined path. Thank you so much for watching. It's your boy Noodle. Hopefully I was able to lay out my thoughts and theories here in a way that made some amount of sense. Obviously most of this was speculation, so we'll see how much of what I've said comes to pass. Thanks to all my patrons, my viewers, my cat Sunday. If your mind is a bit blown, just pop your head back in the socket and stay sane, exiles.